The rationalistic tendency of materialism has done mankind this great service. For the faculties that transcend the senses, by the very fact of their being enmeshed in matter, missioned to work in a physical body, put in harness to draw one car along with the emotional desires and nervous impulses, are exposed to a mixed functioning in which they are in danger of illuminating confusion rather than clarifying truth. Especially is this mixed functioning dangerous when men with unchastened minds and unpurified sensibilities attempt to rise into the higher domains of spiritual experience. In what regions of unsubstantial cloud and semi-brilliant fog, or a murk visited by flashes which blind more than they enlighten, do they not lose themselves by that rash and premature adventure? An adventure necessary indeed in the way in which nature chooses to effect her advance, for she amuses herself as she works, but still for the reason rash and premature. It is necessary, therefore, that advancing knowledge should base herself on a clear, pure, and disciplined intellect. It is necessary, too, that she should correct her errors sometimes by a return to the restraint of sensible fact, the concrete realities of the physical world. The touch of earth is always reinvigorating to the son of earth, even when he seeks a superphysical knowledge. It may even be said that the superphysical can only be really mastered in its fullness. To its heights, we can always reach, when we keep our feet firmly on the physical. Earth is his footing, says the Upanishad, whenever it images the self that manifests in the universe. And it is certainly the fact that the wider we extend and the surer we make our knowledge of the physical world, the wider and surer becomes our foundation for the higher knowledge, even for the highest, even for the Brahmavidya. In emerging, therefore, out of the materialistic period of human knowledge, we must be careful that we do not rashly condemn what we are leaving or throw away even one tittle of its gains, before we can summon perceptions and powers that are well grasped and secure to occupy their place. Rather, we shall observe with respect and wonder the work that atheism has done for the divine, and admire the services that agnosticism has rendered in preparing the illimitable increase of knowledge. In our world, error is continually the handmaid and pathfinder of truth, for error is really a half-truth that stumbles because of its limitations. Often it is truth that wears a disguise in order to arrive unobserved near to its goal. Well, if it could always be, as it has been in the great period we are leaving, the faithful handmaid, severe, conscientious, clean-handed, luminous within its limits, a half-truth, and not a reckless and presumptuous aberration. A certain kind of agnosticism is the final truth of all knowledge. For when we come to the end of whatever path, the universe appears as only a symbol or an appearance of an unknowable reality, which translates itself here into different systems of values, physical values, vital and sensational values, intellectual, ideal, and spiritual values. The more that becomes real to us, the more it is seen to be always beyond defining thought and beyond formulating expression. Mind attains not there, nor speech. And yet, as it is possible to exaggerate with the illusionists the unreality of the appearance, so it is possible to exaggerate the unknowableness of the unknowable. When we speak of it as unknowable, we mean really that it escapes the grasp of our thought and speech, instruments which proceed always by the sense of difference and express by the way of definition. But if not knowable by thought, it is attainable by a supreme effort of consciousness. There is even a kind of knowledge which is one with identity, and by which, in a sense, it can be known. Certainly, that knowledge cannot be reproduced successfully in the terms of thought and speech, but when we have attained to it, the result is a revaluation of essence. That in the symbols of our cosmic consciousness, not only in one, but in all the ranges of symbols, which results in a revolution of our internal being and, through the internal, of our external life. Moreover, there is also a kind of knowledge through which that does reveal itself by all these names and forms of phenomenal existence, which to the ordinary intelligence only conceal it. It is this higher but not highest process of knowledge to which we can attain by passing the limits of the materialistic formula and scrutinizing life, mind and supermind, in the phenomena that are characteristic of them, and not merely in those subordinate movements by which they link themselves to matter. The unknown is not the unknowable. It need not remain the unknown for us. unless we choose ignorance or persist in our first limitations. For to all things that are not unknowable, all things in the universe, there correspond in that universe faculties which can take cognizance of them, and in man, the microcosm, these faculties are always existent and at a certain stage capable of development. We may choose not to develop them. Where they are partially developed, we may discourage and impose on them a kind of atrophy. But fundamentally, all possible knowledge is knowledge within the power of humanity. And since in man there is the inalienable impulse of nature towards self-realization, no struggle of the intellect to limit the action of our capacities within a determined area can forever prevail. When we have proved matter and realized its secret capacities, the very knowledge which has found its convenience in that temporary limitation must cry to us, like the Vedic restrainers, forth now and push forward also in other fields. If modern materialism were simply an unintelligent acquiescence in the material life, the advance might be indefinitely delayed. But since its very soul is the search for knowledge, it will be unable to cry a halt. As it reaches the barriers of sense knowledge and of the reasoning from sense knowledge, its very rush will carry it beyond, and the rapidity and sureness with which it has embraced the visible universe is only an earnest of the energy and success which we may hope to see repeated in the conquest of what lies beyond, once the stride is taken that crosses the barrier. We see already that advance in its obscure beginnings, not only in the one final conception, but in the great line of its general results. Knowledge, by whatever path it has followed, tends to become one. Nothing can be more remarkable and suggestive than the extent to which modern science confirms in the domain of matter the conceptions and even the very formulae of language which were arrived at by a very different method in the Vedanta, the original Vedanta, not of the schools of metaphysical philosophy, but of the Upanishads. And these, on the other hand, often reveal their full significance, their richer contents only when they are viewed in the new light shed by the discoveries of modern science. For instance, that Vedantic expression which describes things in the cosmos as one seed arranged by the universal energy in multitudinous forms. Significant, especially, is the drive of science towards a monism which is consistent with multiplicity, towards the Vedic idea of the one essence with its many becomings. Even if the dualistic appearance of matter and force be insisted on, it does not really stand in the way of this monism. For it will be evident that essential matter is a thing non-existent to the senses, and only, like the pradhana of the Sankhyas, a conceptual form of substance. And in fact the point is increasingly reached where only an arbitrary distinction in thought divides form of substance from form of energy. Matter expresses itself eventually as a formulation of some unknown force. Life, too, that yet unfathomed mystery, begins to reveal itself as an obscure energy of sensibility imprisoned in its material formulation. And when the dividing ignorance is cured which gives us the sense of a gulf between life and matter, it is difficult to suppose that mind, life, and matter will be found to be anything else than one energy triply formulated, the triple world of the Vedic seers. Nor will the conception then be able to endure of a brute material force as the mother of mind. The energy that creates the world can be nothing else than a will, and will is only consciousness applying itself to a work and a result. What is that work and result, if not a self-involution of consciousness in form and a self-evolution out of form, so as to actualize some mighty possibility in the universe which it has created? And what is its will in man, if not a will to unending life, to unbounded knowledge, to unfettered power? Science itself begins to dream of the physical conquest of death, expresses an insatiable thirst for knowledge, is working out something like a terrestrial omnipotence for humanity. Space and time are contracting to the vanishing point in its works, and it strives in 100 ways to make man the master of circumstance, and so lighten the fetters of causality. The idea of limit, of the impossible, begins to grow a little shadowy, and it appears instead that whatever man constantly wills, he must in the end be able to do, for the consciousness in the race eventually finds the means. It is not in the individual that this omnipotence expresses itself, but the collective will of mankind that works out with the individual as a means. And yet when we look more deeply, it is not any conscious will of the collectivity, but a superconscious might that uses the individual as a center and means, the collectivity as a condition and field. What is this but the God in man, the infinite identity, the multitudinous unity, the omniscient, the omnipotent, who having made man in his own image, with the ego as a center of working, with the race, the collective Narayan, the Viva Manava as the mold and circumscription, seeks to express in them some image of the unity, omniscience, omnipotence, which are the self-conception of the divine. That which is immortal in mortals is a God, and established inwardly as an energy working out in our divine powers. It is this vast cosmic impulse which the modern world, without quite knowing its own aim, yet serves in all its activities and labors subconsciously to fulfill. But there is always a limit and an encumbrance. The limit of the material field in the knowledge, the encumbrance of the material machinery in the power. But here also the latest trend is highly significant of a freer future. As the outposts of scientific knowledge come more and more to be set on the borders that divide the material from the immaterial, so also the highest achievements of practical science are those which tend to simplify and reduce to the vanishing point the machinery by which the greatest effects are produced. Wireless telegraphy is nature's exterior sign and pretext for a new orientation. The sensible physical means for the intermediate transmission of the physical force is removed. It is only preserved at the points of impulsion and reception. Eventually, even these must disappear, for when the laws and forces of the supraphysical are studied with the right starting point, the means will infallibly be found for mind directly to seize on the physical energy and speed it accurately upon its errand. There, once we bring ourselves to recognize it, lie the gates that open upon the enormous vistas of the future. Yet even if we had full knowledge and control of the worlds immediately above matter, there would still be a limitation and still a beyond. The last knot of our bondage is at that point where the external draws into oneness with the internal. The machinery of ego itself becomes subtilized to the vanishing point, and the law of our action is at last unity, embracing and possessing multiplicity, and no longer, as now, multiplicity struggling towards some figure of unity. There is the central throne of cosmic knowledge looking out on her widest dominion. There the empire of oneself with the empire of one's world. There the life in the eternally consummate being, and the realization of his divine nature in our human existence.